Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, President Trump says asylum seekers aren't showing up for immigration hearings.
Tell me, what percentage of people come back? Would you say 100%? No, you're a little off. Like, how about 2%?
What a new study tells us about the actual rate of appearances.
2 years into using a system that listens for gunfire in neighborhoods, we'll get an update on how well ShotSpotter is working and what folks in the community think about it.
And the trial continues for a Navy SEAL accused of war crimes. We have a live report on what happened in court today. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. It's Wednesday, June 19th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. Today is day 2 of Chief Eddie Gallagher's trial, continued with a witness testifying that the teen ISIS prisoner looked as young as 12, though he was possibly older. Gallagher, a Navy SEAL, is accused of murdering the prisoner while he was deployed in Iraq. KPBS reporter Steve Walsh is live from Naval Base San Diego with the very latest. Steve.
Well, that's right, Ebony. Today was day 2 of the prosecutor's case in the case of SEAL Chief Eddie Gallagher, who's charged with killing a wounded teenage ISIS fighter in his custody and then posing with the body. Now, 2 SEALs testified today, 2 SEALs from his own team, including SEAL Chief Craig Miller, who was under Gallagher in Iraq in 2017. He testified that the wounded ISIS prisoner was still alive when he initially saw him and before Eddie Gallagher got there, when he was brought in by Iraqi forces. Then he walked away and then came back, and then he said he saw Eddie Gallagher stab the wounded fighter 2 times in the neck and saw blood coming out of his neck. He then told his commander, Lieutenant Portier, but nothing happened after that. Now, this morning we saw testimony from former Special Operator Dylan DeLay. He said the detainee did look as young as 12. He could have been as old as 13 or 14 or 15, he said, but he was very scrawny. He had a wristwatch on one arm all the way up to the bicep. He was so small. So this sniper describes Gallagher as killing an elderly man with his sniper rifle on Father's Day in 2017, and also shooting at a group of women and a crowd of civilians. Now, the defense points out that DeLay didn't actually witness Gallagher pulling the trigger. The 2 were in different positions. Gallagher is also seen to initially provide medical aid to the wounded fighter. So both SEALs, though, describe a night after the wounded fighter died. DeLay says that Gallagher told them, "I know you guys are not all right with what happened. It was just an ISIS dirtbag." More SEALs are scheduled to testify in the next couple of days as a prosecutor's case moves forward. Reporting from Naval Base San Diego, Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
Thanks, Steve. A new study out of Syracuse University contradicts a recent claim by the Department of Homeland Security regarding asylum seekers living in the U.S. KPBS reporter Max Ravelin-Nadler explains the data.
Last week, Acting Homeland Security Secretary Kevin McAleenan told Senator Lindsey Graham at a Senate panel that 90% of families seeking refuge in the United States did not show up to their court hearings.
But we do see too many cases where people are not showing up. We did an expedited pilot with family units this year with ICE and the immigration courts. Out of those 7,000 cases, 90 received final orders of removal in absentia, 90%.
90% did not show up?
Correct.
But a new study by researchers at Syracuse University indicates the reality is just the opposite. The study reviewed the cases of 47,000 families who had arrived in the United States between last September and the end of May. It found that over 85% of all families who have had an initial court hearing have shown up for it. The study also found that 80% of those families have attended every court hearing they've had as they seek asylum or another form of relief. In San Diego, those numbers are higher. Over 95% of families have shown up for all of their hearings. Nationwide, 99% of families who had legal representation attended all of their court hearings. Max Nadler, KPBS News.
Governor Gavin Newsom is formally apologizing to Native Americans on behalf of the state. He made the comments while visiting the future home of the California Indian Heritage Center in Sacramento. Governor Newsom says the killing of California natives in the 1800s was genocide.
It's humbling for me, having believed I was educated, to have been so ignorant of our past, to have been so unaware of how ashamed I should be as a Californian, fifth generation, about how so many of your ancestors were treated.
The governor says he is forming a new council to examine the state's role in exploiting the Native population. The latest census shows California has the most Native Americans in the U.S. In the late 2016, San Diego joined about 100 cities nationwide that used a gunshot detection system called ShotSpotter. 2.5 years later, KPBS reporter John Carroll looks at how ShotSpotter is working.
Before the ShotSpotter system was launched, the only way police would know to respond to shots fired was if they happened to be in the area or from people calling 911.
When the community doesn't call us and notify us that there's a situation going on, either through 911 or the non-emergency line, we won't know about it.
Of course, police want people to call 911 if they hear gunshots. But with ShotSpotter, they're notified within a minute of a gun being used. The system uses sensors mounted on light poles. They triangulate the sound, giving police a precise location of where the gunfire happened. Takeuchi says that allows police to get on scene quickly enough to preserve evidence, perhaps even to capture a shooter. City data was used to determine where to deploy ShotSpotter. That data showed most gunshot calls came from 4 neighborhoods in southeast San Diego: Valencia Park, Lincoln Park, O'Farrell, and Skyline Paradise Hills. But those neighborhoods are not necessarily supportive of ShotSpotter.
That does not prevent it from a crime from happening, and it does not help you to solve a crime.
Bishop Cornelius Bowser has been a community activist for years. He says the ShotSpotter system was installed with no community input. That did not and does not sit well with people in southeast San Diego.
That's not the way you build trust. That's not the way that you work with the community to keep the community safe.
But Lieutenant Takeuchi says SDPD is very much focused on community policing, the building of trust with the people they police.
Without community trust, it's very, very difficult for a department to operate. And we recognize that, we understand that, we value that.
But Bowser says there's another problem with ShotSpotter. The ShotSpotter company, and police for that matter, say the devices are only triggered by explosive sounds like gunfire. But there is skepticism in the community, some fearing a Big Brother type scenario where those devices could actually be listening to conversations. Takeuchi says the system does not capture conversations.
It's looking for those specific sound waves, and when those sound waves trigger the system, that's when the recording occurs.
The city is in the middle of a 4-year, $1 million contract with ShotSpotter. Bowser says it's a waste of money.
That $1 million could be going to something that's way more effective, and this does not help build community trust and accountability.
Takeuchi disagrees.
If gunfire were to erupt and we get to a location where no 911 call is received and there is an individual that's been shot and we're able to render first aid and we're able to save that person's life, I think the system is paid for itself.
One more thing to consider. In the area where ShotSpotter is now deployed, there were an average of 4 murders a year in the years leading up to its installation. Over the last 2.5 years, there haven't been any. Whether that has anything to do with ShotSpotter is anyone's guess. John Carroll, KPBS News.
A wall in City Heights is causing controversy between community members and Caltrans. KPBS reporter Priya Sridhar takes us to the park where people have waited years for action.
This is a community whose heart and soul is in this, and it's a whole history to it.
It's a strategy session in City Heights. A handful of community leaders and residents have gathered every few weeks for 5 years to try to get a mural painted in their neighborhood. When they first got the idea, residents commissioned Linda Sheridan, CEO of the San Diego Cultural Arts Alliance, to plan the process.
Art is transformative. It reflects the truth of a community and what it is, especially this mural. People are not going to believe what this mural is going to communicate, not only to the community, but to the region and any visitors that come. It's the visual of the heart of the people.
Sheridan sent out surveys to City Heights residents asking them what they wanted the mural to say about their community.
They learn from each other. They have very diverse backgrounds. They speak, I don't know how many different languages in this community, and yet they connect with each other, they learn from each other, and they really honor that.
The theme they settled on was unity in the community, and they wanted to put it on a 263-foot-long wall in Terralta Park. The park sits directly on top of Interstate 15 and used to have a lot of gang activity. Dan Tomsky, a community leader, says the park represents the change and growth City Heights has made.
The wall was being quite often tagged by, with graffiti by gang-related youth and others. And the quest was knowing that mural art is a real deterrent, from that kind of vandalism, and also is a great opportunity to redirect youth into positive expression.
In addition to displaying the diversity of City Heights, the mural features key neighborhood landmarks like the City Heights Library, Central School, and the iconic Terralta Neighborhood Park sign. The community decided to include the words acceptance, diversity, harmony, and justice in Somali, Spanish, Vietnamese, and English. The plans also included a few messages to represent the unity in the community theme, including "We are America," "We welcome you," and "Education, Reading, and Respect." Tomsky says the words help emphasize what the mural represents.
The text, the words, are an integral part of the art expression, and in a sense are very sacred at this point. They underscore, I think in a very constructive way, the hopes, the aspirations, as well as the history, the diversity, culturally and age-wise of this community.
But it's those words that started their problems. Caltrans owns the wall, and according to their policy, text is not allowed on transportation art. Back in April, the mural organizers asked for a formal waiver so they could include the text, and then they waited. They got no response from Caltrans for months. Sheridan, who helped plan the process from the beginning, says the years-long wait has been beyond frustrating.
Do you know whenever something gets to be so absurd that it's ridiculously funny? And unfortunately, that's what's going to happen. I mean, it's like you want to shake your head and say, seriously, we can't function differently from this. We can't function at a better level in response to the needs of a community.
The mural working group doesn't want to give up hope. They've enlisted the help of District 9 Councilman Georgette Gomez's office and are looking into bringing more of their elected representatives on board. They also want to invite Caltrans to Terralta Park to have a conversation with the community and understand their plans.
The mural team hadn't heard from Caltrans in months, but once I started working on the story, I was able to get some answers. Caltrans told me that they do plan to approve putting the mural here, but it won't be allowed to have text.
They say because they're a state entity, they're required to be, quote, content neutral, and that they can't arbitrarily pick and choose which art can have text and which won't without violating the U.S. Constitution. But mural organizers like Sheridan say both images and words can be content with a message.
You can offend somebody with an image. You can offend somebody with a color of some sort or the way you use that color.
Maria Cortez, a longtime City Heights resident, says she will continue to fight for the mural she says celebrates the change and growth of her neighborhood.
But now the park is thriving. The community has come together. Communities come out here. The kids play soccer games late in the evenings. We have had movie nights here in the park. The mural would also integrate art. And what a difference it would make to have art displayed out here throughout the community.
She says getting the mural painted would also be a sign of how her community has learned to work together And to her, that would be the reward. Priya Sridhar, KPBS News.
More than 400 apartments are going up next to the Grantville trolley station. The plan was recently approved by board members from the Metropolitan Transit System. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen shows us how it's expected to help students and low-income families.
Grantville is just one stop away from SDSU on the Green Line trolley. That's what makes the site so perfect for student-oriented housing. And as you can see, the parking lot is pretty underutilized. That's why MTS officials say it's perfect for transit-oriented development. The plan comprises 2 buildings, one with subsidized affordable rents, one that will charge the market rate. Jonathan Taylor is a project manager with Affirmed Housing, which is developing the affordable component. He says this location is obvious.
It especially makes sense when you're talking about folks who have limited incomes. So maybe they don't own a car, they don't have the ability to ever own one, and it makes sense for them to be near transit. And so that's why affordable housing and transit pair so well.
Now, some MTS board members are disappointed that the housing in this project isn't denser, but officials say building taller would have increased construction costs to the point of making the project infeasible. Reporting at the Grantville Trolley Station, Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
It's a milestone intended to give children a strong academic start. Today, kids experiencing homelessness had a chance to celebrate, graduating from preschool.
Please stand up.
Father Joe's Villages offers a therapeutic childcare center to help kids overcome learning challenges. Today, the program held its graduation ceremony for a dozen children who will now move on to grade school. The local nonprofit says the support is vital.
If not for this program and the support we give the parents, they would be on the streets. These are kids that when they come to us, typically they're developmentally delayed, academically, emotionally, and socially.
Studies show children experiencing homelessness often struggle with developmental delays and are 4 times as likely to repeat a grade in school. Well, the sun made an appearance today, but June gloom is moving back in. Meteorologist Dajia Swad shows us what we can expect in the coming days.
Spotty drizzle coming through the San Diego metro tonight as we're going to be noticing an upper level trough moving in for your Thursday through Saturday across California. Now with that marine layer will deepen, and that's going to really induce that June gloom, allowing that cloud cover to even stretch its way inland for the coming days. We're dropping down to 63 in Oceanside tonight, a low of 56 in Mount Laguna, and cooling down to 72 in Borrego Springs, and still holding on to mainly dry and clear conditions. As for your Thursday, well, heat still building out to the deserts. We will notice some cooler air drop into the south behind a cold front, and that's the trend that we're talking about. So for your Thursday, Friday, Saturday, a bit more cloud cover in places. Oceanside, a high of 72, especially in the morning is where we've been noticing those clouds. Very typical for this time of year. As you head inland areas, we'll still be feeling some of that heat in Borrego Springs with a high of 100 forecasted and 72 in Mount Laguna. Also holding off from any clouds for tomorrow's forecast, at least for the majority of your day. But by the weekend, at least Friday and Saturday, we'll notice that marine layer continuing to be an influence. So coastal areas, your temperatures not changing much, remaining in the lower 70s. But Friday, you'll notice that mist, light drizzle, definitely more dominant, as well as those clouds holding on. It's going to be hard to clear throughout your Friday. Saturday, low clouds will eventually break, so just not as strong here across the coast with that marine layer, and will once again remain in the lower 70s. Into the inland areas, we'll be topping off at 72 Friday, trying to get some clearing. Low clouds continue to be the trend through the early week, but notice for the Sunday, Monday time frame, your highs reached the lower 80s, so a bit of a warming trend there. We'll slowly cool down here Friday, Saturday, no longer in the triple digits out to the deserts, but we will notice Thursday and Friday are winds gusting upwards to 50 miles per hour, not only in the deserts, but even into the mountains. Going to be noticing clouds and some gusty winds due to that trough, bringing in the cooler air. So 72 Thursday, 67 Friday with low clouds, and then still feeling a bit cool Saturday. We'll be warming up into your Sunday and Monday across the mountains back into the lower 70s. Reporting for KPBS News, I'm your meteorologist, Dajia Swan. Back to you.
NPR reaches more than 100 million people across all platforms every month. As public editor, Elizabeth Jensen's job is to help promote transparency in journalism. This as trust in media remains a concern. Joining us now is Elizabeth Jensen. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So what is the role of NPR's public editor?
Well, it's a unique role in journalism. I am the last remaining full-time public editor among media organizations, mainstream media organizations in the country. My job is to represent the views and the concerns of the listeners and readers who come to listen to NPR and come to npr.org.
As the public editor, you receive tens of thousands of comments.
Yes.
How does NPR handle a perception of bias?
So we do get a lot of complaints about bias. So we get all these. We have an email, contact the public editor. We go through all of the emails. We label all those emails. By far, bias is the biggest concern of those who decide to contact us. It breaks down, so it's both. People are complaining that NPR is too liberal. People are complaining that NPR is too conservative. So it really breaks down, and a lot of it is just perception. NPR has 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at night. Very few of those listeners are actually hearing all 2 hours. So if you're in your car and you hear an interview and it's with a Republican and you don't hear the interview with the Democrat, then you think, NPR is only talking to Republicans, or vice versa. So part of my role is to say, hey, did you hear this interview? Or I do look into the concerns. Sometimes I feel like the perspectives maybe have been sort of weighted towards one side or the other. So I did a column once. So part of my role is to write a column. That's part of the transparency. So I did a column once explaining, well, you haven't heard a lot of Republican voices on this particular issue because NPR has been trying to get Republicans to come on and they've declined to do the interviews. You can only talk to people who will talk to you. Sometimes it's just that people haven't heard actually all of the varied coverage.
And how has the tone of the comments changed over time, particularly in the Trump administration era?
I would say that there was a big change a couple of years ago. I think that's because people are very passionate about their politics these days, and I think we've become more polarized. That has certainly changed the tenor of the communications to our office. We try to sort of look and listen to all the complaints that come in, even if they're not particularly civil. We don't tend to answer emails that use abusive language, but if it's just a rant, sometimes even those rants sort of contain valid points of view, and people are just being very passionate about explaining it that way. So we try to look into it, I would prefer going back to the more civilized tone of conversation, yes.
And what obstacles or challenges do journalists face in covering President Trump? He has said repeatedly that he feels that he's been covered unfairly by the press.
I think it's a challenge because it feels as though there's a goal to discredit the journalism, right? So in this era, I think when you have someone sort of so high profile who's saying that there's a lot of untrustworthy news out there, I think you have to really double down on your standards and say, okay, we're going to have everything buttoned down. We're really going to work at corrections. We're going to work at being very transparent again. We're going to label opinion. So one thing that NPR has done a lot in the past couple of years is being much clearer about what is opinion content. NPR doesn't do a lot of opinion content, but it does some. So labeling, okay, is this an opinion or is this fact-based journalism?
How is public media different?
I've been impressed since I've been working inside NPR as opposed to outside at the care with which they approach these issues. They have a publicly posted code of ethics, an ethics handbook. The standards editor makes every effort to ensure that folks pay attention to it. He works very closely with the newsroom to instill what they call a culture of journalism, with the member stations and inside the newsroom itself. And I think there is a serious care taken to the quality of the journalism. Look, it's we're all human, and sometimes mistakes get made. But I've been impressed with the attention to detail that they do pay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, a new report from the United Nations further links Saudi Arabia to the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.